Hi, thank you so much for coming out today. I'm so excited to be here. And as I was pulling in today, I realized that the very first Macaron class I did was in this room. And it was 17? We looked at the year, and there were 200 people here. It was the largest class I'd ever done, and I was so overwhelmed. I was a little nervous. I'm not nervous now, because I know you guys. You're all great. I love you guys. So, Randy, thank you so much for that kind introduction. And we're here today, yes, to talk about the French macaron. It's not the macaroon, different cookie. Still really good, don't get me wrong, but not the same cookie. We're going to talk a little bit about the macaron and the history of it, and then I'm going to talk about the ingredients and the process to make it, and then I'll do a demonstration, show you how to make it. Hopefully, if you've tried to make them at home, anybody try to make them at home? Successfully? Like, nah, maybe a little bit. Hopefully you'll get some tips today to help you be more successful. Like Randy mentioned, I do have hands-on classes at the bakery, and you can see my schedule on my website, thelakehousebakery.com, so check that out. Any questions you've got? I believe we're fielding some. Anyone that has online questions, or if you've got some, just let me know. I'd be happy to answer them. And then I'll hang around for a while afterwards to have any conversations in depth that you might want to talk about. So are y'all ready? Let's do this. All right. So the history of macarons is what we're going to do, how to make them, and then we're going to finish some things up. We kind of touched on this, but what's in a name? Macaroon versus macaron. One is the spelling, because it's two O's versus one. I should also caveat and back up a second. I took French in college because I wanted to be a pastry chef since I was a little kid. So I'm like, I need to learn French. And the instructor and I extra credit, like I tried, I could not do it. And she passed me because she knew I needed the credit, as long as I promised to never, ever speak French again in my life. And I've tried to honor that promise, but honestly, it wasn't my fault. She was a lovely person, but she was from French Guiana. So hearing classical French with an African accent, my brain could not connect those dots. So it's not my fault. I still have honored my promise, and I try really hard not to speak French, and if I mangle French words, it's because I'm keeping my promise. So macaron, they are not necessarily French, but I'll touch on that again in a second. So historically, let's go into that. Most almond-based pastries are actually from the Middle East. Specifically, macarons date as far back as the Middle Ages. So this is not a new cookie. It's a new cookie to the U.S. and been very popular more recently, but it's been around for several centuries. From the Middle East, it went to European sailors, specifically Dutch and French, brought the pastry over, and it kind of settled in France and Italy first before going anywhere else. Legend has it that Catherine Medici, thank you again, I'm terrible at names and French, when she married King Henry in 1533, brought her pastry chefs with her, of course, and then that made the migration from Italy into France. So between 1533 through the beginning of the French Revolution, it was exclusively for the nobility. It was exclusively royal, primarily because the ingredients were rather expensive. Sugar was not something that was easily accessible to people, and they were just always considered very royal. They were given as wedding gifts at various weddings, and once King Louis XIV moved to Versailles, they were given as a welcoming gift to anyone who attended or came to Versailles. At the beginning of the French Revolution, things started to change, and things were not just for royals anymore. Two Carmelite nuns were fleeing the war and were seeking asylum in Nancy, a region in France, and to make their way and to pay their room and board and to have some money, they started making and selling pastries. Most notably among them was the macaron, and they actually became known as Macaron de Sur, which I think is sister. Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate the help. And that's where they really became famous. So from 1533 to 1789, all right. So at this point, the cookies weren't what we see today. It was a single cookie, tan in color, crackled on top. It was not filled in any way, and it was just a single cookie. And it's still considered, there's a pastry shop in France today, and again, I'm not going to mangle the name, that is still making that original cookie. And that recipe has been handed down in secret from chef to apprentice for 230 years. And you can go to this specific pastry shop and buy this specific cookie. 1930, we kind of jump a bit, saw a pastry chef in Paris, actually trying to get his name, Pierre. I'm not even going to try his last name. He was a Parisian pâtissier, and he got the idea to sandwich the two cookies together with ganache. And that was the first time it was done, was in the 30s. And that pretty much is the big break in the two. So one is the Parisian macaron, and the other is a macaron. And from there, it became to the U.S., and every color and flavor, and they're so much fun, and they're so tasty. Have y'all had macarons? No. I've actually had people that haven't. So I'll be glad for you guys to try some. Macaron Day started in 2005. It was a fundraising opportunity for local charities in Paris. Bakeries around the city got together, and they would, like you'd go shopping at a clothes store, and you'd buy something, you'd get a macaron. And then it was promoting the macaron as well as the local charity so that people were giving back to the community. And this is the macaron. This is the one that we all know and love, the sandwich cookie. That's what we're going to make. I've probably just gone completely around, my slides. Medieval, Middle East, Italian, French, modern day. Yeah. Any questions on the quick history of French macarons? All right. So now we'll do the presentation later. In the 35 years I've been doing this professionally, I have found that the smaller the ingredients, in terms of number of ingredients, the more complex the process. Baguette is the number one example of that. Macaron is right below it because there's only 3 ingredients. That's it. 3. Egg whites, sugar, almond flour. Now, we're going to talk about each one of those. We're going to look at the process to make it. Then we're going to talk about some fillings. I mentioned ganache earlier, but we now typically have another filling in there, and we'll talk about that. Basic ingredients. Almond flour, not almond meal. Do you know the difference?
No.
Almond flour is the almond blanched, finely ground, whereas almond meal still has the skin on it. And the skin impacts and interferes with the process, so you need to have them blanched. You could buy blanched almonds and attempt to make and grind them down yourself, but chances are you'd end up making almond butter, which goes really great on an English muffin. So don't do that. Bob's Red Mill is a great brand. The Kirkland brand is the cheapest I found. They typically come in 1 to 3 pound packs, so they can be kind of expensive, but depending on how many you're making, you could stretch it. Any almond flour that you don't use while you're making them, freeze. The almonds themselves have a fairly high fat content, and if you don't properly store them, the fat will go rancid and you'll have bad almonds, and that's not fun for anybody. Almond flour. Da-da-da. Any questions so far? All right, egg whites. The incredible edible egg, right? I love eggs. They're so incredible. They're just amazing. So we only need the whites on these, though. What are egg whites? It's protein. We need the protein, but we need the right amount of protein. So we need to handle them a little bit differently than we would something else. You have to age the egg whites. The only way to do that is to separate the yolk from the white 3 to 4 days a week before you're ready to make macarons. So there's a little bit of planning in this. So today is Sunday. We separated our egg whites on Wednesday. We do that a lot because we make a lot of macarons at the bakery. But so we have a ready supply of aged egg whites. Now, you cannot, under any circumstances, use the carton o' egg whites from the grocery store. It won't work. And actually, there's a little disclaimer on the carton that says, "Do not use for whipping." Because those the egg whites have been pasteurized, the pasteurization process completely denatures those protein bonds, and we need the protein. First of all, we need protein. But second of all, we're going to create a meringue with this, and we need the structure that the protein will create. So you can't use the carton o' egg whites. Use them to make scrambled eggs or something else. When you separate your egg whites, you've got your yolks in one container and your egg whites in another. If you happen to break some of the yolk and it gets into your egg white, do your level best to scoop it out. If you can't, just put the yolks back in it and make a cake or make scrambled eggs, have an omelet, do something else with it, make French toast, something else. But you can't use it if the egg whites aren't completely fat-free. Fat inhibits the air pocket growth that we need, and we need lots of air pockets. So we've separated these on Wednesday. We left them in the refrigerator in a covered container, and then we pulled them from the container. From the refrigerator in the container, covered on the counter overnight. They need to get to room temperature, and baking is chemistry. 100% chemistry. Every ingredient should be at room temperature when you use it. Yeah.
Say I froze my almonds.
Yeah.
How long should I get those out of the baking?
Overnight. Yep. Say again? Oh, so the question was, if my almonds are frozen, how long do I need to bring them out to let them thaw? And the answer is overnight. They need to be at room temperature. And to confirm you've done that, overnight is the minimum of time. You could go a day earlier than that, but at least the night before. Once they're at room temperature, you'll use them. And you could, since this is a meringue, you could use a stabilizer. But I found if you follow this process, you really don't need to. Stabilizer that most people use is cream of tartar, which is a perfectly acceptable stabilizer. It's not a chemical. It's a natural byproduct of venting, which is why when you go to buy a little container of cream of tartar, sometimes you'll see a wine cask on there and some grapes. And I was like, what the heck? Why is that on there? So I did the research, and it's because it's a natural byproduct of winemaking. It's left in the bottom of the cask. So about 1/4 teaspoon per recipe-ish. Any questions on the egg whites? Yeah.
Why must you age the egg whites for days before you use them?
Egg whites are protein, and we love that about them. And the protein, think of our muscles, is all bound up tight like this. And we want it to be relaxed and groovy. Nothing works really well this way. Most things work really well this way. So you want it to be relaxed and groovy. You want it to be chill. Yeah.
Is there an age associated with the cream of tartar? I mean, do you have a little container of it and had it forever? Don't use it?
Yes, because it won't be as effective. Anything over 6 months, just get rid of it.
Get rid of everything.
Yeah. Yes, so about room temperature.
You need to repeat each question because the
Okay.
audience cannot.
Got it. Sorry, thanks for that reminder, Eddie. So the question was, if you have cream of tartar that's older, should you get rid of it? And yes, anything over 6 months, it won't be as effective, so get rid of it. The first question was on why do we age the egg whites, and that so the protein bonds can be still there, but not as tightly bound together. The last question is, why should all the ingredients be at room temperature? Pastry chefs are control freaks. We just are. And this is chemistry. The more control you have over the variables that go into what you're making, the more successful you will be. So the first variable is weight. So all ingredients should be weighed. The second variable that you can easily control is temperature. If everything is at the same temperature, you won't need to mix as long as you would need to if something were cold. So if you've got cold egg whites but room temperature almond flour, it won't be as successful because of the thermodynamics going on. Did that answer your question? I also am going to caveat that with that includes pie dough. That cold butter is nonsense. Anyway, that's another class. Yes, ma'am.
Can you use other kind of flour?
And the question is, can we use another kind of flour? No. It has to be almond flour. You can replace a portion of the almond flour with another nut flour. So pistachio, hazelnut, pecan. It has to be another nut, though, so these are not nut allergen friendly. But they can be made vegan with agua faba, but that's a separate process and way more complicated. But they have to have nuts. They are inherently gluten-free because of it, though, which is nice. Any other questions so far? All right. Egg whites. Then sugar. I love sugar. Not as much as I love chocolate, but I love sugar. I think I have more sugar in my blood than blood. Sugar comes in two forms for this recipe. The first form is granulated table white sugar. The stuff you put in your coffee in the morning. Me, I put a little bit more than... But it's table white sugar. The other is powdered sugar. Now, powdered sugar is simply is granulated sugar pulverized. And when you go to the store and you find the container, it'll say 10x or 6x. That's the number of times the sugar was pulverized to get it into a powder. So, again, the higher the number, the more times it's been pulverized. Typically, most stores is going to be around 6x. The other thing that you'll find is almost all powdered sugars have cornstarch added as an anti-caking agent. That's perfectly acceptable. This formula takes that into account and works with it. You can find powdered sugar without cornstarch in it, but it's really expensive and it's not really necessary. Just get the stuff from the store. It's fine. Now, the two sugars they're going to go into two different places. The granulated sugar is going to go into the egg whites to help us create the meringue, and the powdered sugar is going to go in with the almond meal to create the dry for the batter. And you'll see that when I do the demonstration. Fillings. Remember I mentioned I love chocolate? I love chocolate. Ganache is the traditional filling. Ganache is simply heavy cream and chocolate together, combined. There are so many variables and variations and ways to put those two together, including the ratio of cream and chocolate. More cream is a softer ganache. Less cream is a firmer ganache. You could add all kinds of flavors to it. You could add liqueurs to it. You could anything you could possibly think of. You could take two different chocolates, combine them together, and then have your hot cream. It's completely just whatever you want to do, pretty much. It's like the Wild West for ganache. But that's it. You warm some heavy cream. You pour that over the chocolate. The heat from the cream melts the chocolate. Whisk. Boom, ganache. You can add butter. You don't have to. You could steep some Earl Grey tea in the cream as you're heating it and make an Earl Grey ganache. You could add cinnamon or cayenne and whatever you want. It's ganache. It's so good. Any questions on ganache before we move on? Okay. Buttercream has become a more popular, more prevalent filling nowadays. Now, in the world of pastries, there are 7 different types of buttercream. That's a lot of buttercream. But basically, there's 3 that most people are aware of and use more than anything else. American buttercream, which is simply fat and powdered sugar beat to death. Crisco and powdered sugar. That's the one that we typically grew up on. Has kind of a grainy texture to it. It's not very temperature stable. Anybody who's had their birthday in July with an American buttercream, watch the frosting just slump right off the cake because it's shortening. I prefer butter, of course, because there's nothing better than butter. Butter is amazing. So, that's one of the next types is a Swiss buttercream, which is egg whites and sugar cooked together, whipped to a meringue, and then butter added. It's much more temperature stable. It's got a really nice smooth texture. It's easy to flavor and color. And it's just like yum. So, so very good. The last buttercream that most people use is Italian buttercream. The difference between the Swiss and the Italian is with the Italian, the sugar is cooked to a softball stage and the eggs are whipped. Then the softball stage sugar is poured into the egg whites and then whipped again and then butter added. Now, that's an extremely dangerous way to make buttercream. Anytime you cook sugar, it's extremely dangerous, and I do not recommend it unless you have done it many, many, many times or have professional adult supervision with you. Sugar burns are the worst burns in a kitchen. They're horrible because it becomes viscous and sticky on you, and your first instinct is to go like that, which just takes the rest of your arm with you. Like, it's not fun, it's very dangerous. Stick with the Swiss. It works really, really well. And we're not in Memphis where it's really, really hot, and the buttercream won't slump off your cake in July. It'll be perfectly fine. It'll be soft, but it won't fall off. All three can be colored and flavored. The American is more difficult to take colors and flavors because of the nature of what it is. The Swiss and the Italian both do. Mango jelly, food colors, dry spices, chocolate, raspberry jam, like whatever you want can go into a buttercream and have really good success. Any questions on buttercreams? Yes, ma'am.
Do you make a dairy-free filling at all?
Do you make a dairy-free filling? We can, again, with the vegan macarons that we make. It is because we could use a shortening and do a variation on an American buttercream, so it's possible to do. We just need to be careful when in the year it is. Again, in July, they'll just fall out. Yeah, but it is possible. Yeah. Yes?
Would you have to modify the recipe for the buttercream to add in the color at all?
The question is, do we have to modify the recipe for the buttercream to add colors? No. That's the beauty in it, and why it's one of the more popular fillings and frostings for cakes is its versatility and the ability to take color and flavor. So typically, no. Any other questions on buttercream?
I'm curious, what are the other names of the 4 types of buttercream?
The question is the other types of buttercream. French, German, and I can't remember the other two right now. I knew someone was going to ask me that too. And there are different ways to cook the sugar down. French uses the whole egg versus just the egg whites. And German actually is a variation on the Swiss, which takes the Swiss and adds pastry cream.
Okay.
And I can't remember the other two right now. I'll text you at 3 o'clock in the morning when I do remember it.
Incredible.
Yeah. All right, so the basic process, and I'm going to go through this kind of quickly because I'm going to show you what that process is. We're going to make a meringue. We're going to fold in the dry. We're going to obtain, and the French totally made this word up. They really did. It's called the macaron. I call it the flowage, and I'll explain that when we get there. We're going to pipe the shells. This is a piped cookie. We're going to bake them, fill them, and then eat them. And obviously, we don't have an oven here, so we're not going to do that part of it. But through the magic of TV, I have some pre-made. So that's basically the whole process. Now, that sounds pretty straightforward and simple, doesn't it? It ain't. Let me start with the making. Each step is progressive. If you don't get step 1 right, the next 5 won't work. If you get step 1 right, but don't get step 2 right, the next 3 won't work. You see where I'm going with that? Yeah. You have to get each step in succession done correctly, which is why many people are intimidated by these. Fortunately, the processes themselves are very simple. They just take a little bit of, what was that word I used again to describe pastry chefs? Control. Yeah, we're all about control. So we're going to make a meringue. We're going to slowly stir the egg whites and add the sugar. We're going to let them whip to a stiff peak, and I'll show you what that looks like when I do the demonstration. And again, if you're not comfortable making a meringue, add some cream of tartar to the sugar. Mix it in so that as you're adding the sugar to the egg whites, you're going to get the stabilization that you need. Because a meringue essentially is a stiff egg foam. So like whipped cream is is cream foam, that's all a meringue is an egg foam. It's just really densely packed together. And I'll show you the proper consistency, and I'll give you some techniques to remember as you're making it at home. We're going to fold in the dry, and we're going to talk about that when I do the demonstration. And the dry at this point is the powdered sugar and the almond flour and any dry flavor that you've wanted to add. The beauty in French macarons is they're completely versatile in terms of colors and flavors. What's your favorite spice?
My favorite what?
Spice.
I don't know.
Pick anyone, favorite spice. Cinnamon, nutmeg, ginger. Mango would go in the dried mango, dehydrated mango. Absolutely. You can make the shells any flavor you want. I've even seen squid ink. It had a shrimp mousse in the filling, and I couldn't bring myself to try it. I wanted to, but I was just a little afraid of that one. Because it was a savory, right? Totally doable. But any dry thing that you could think of, a tea, Earl Grey, ribose, chai, chamomile, nettle. I've done nettle shells with the vanilla filling. They were really quite tasty. I've done butterfly pea. There's some other word for that tea. It's a butterfly blue, whatever that blue tea.
Yeah, it's
Butterfly pea berry.
It's butterfly pea.
I've done that as a dry for my filling. The only thing you have to do is make sure that it's ground into a very fine powder, like cinnamon, nutmeg, cardamom. Oh. Citrus rinds, the question is on citrus rinds, no. You could freshly zest a lemon, but not the whole rind. So, because the rind has too much fat in it, you need just the zest, and you would do it immediately. You could take freeze-dried fruit, run that through a spice mill, and add that. So freeze-dried fruits, typically raspberry, strawberry, blueberry, sometimes apple, sometimes mango. I've seen banana, typically down the baby food aisle in the grocery store. Not the yogurt-covered ones, but just the dehydrated. Trader Joe's has strawberry, blueberry, raspberry, I think, all the time. So those, like I said, in a spice mill, add it to your dry and mix it in from the very beginning. And that will flavor and color your shell. We're going to fold it into the egg whites in thirds, making sure that the dry is evenly mixed in before we move on to the next set. And then we're going to continue to fold. Once all the dry is mixed in, we're going to continue that folding process until we get the correct flowage. And that will make sense in a minute. But it's like molten lava. But again, the French call that macaron, but flowage works. Then we're going to pipe the shells, and I'll show you how to get it from the bowl into a pastry bag, and then from the pastry bag onto your sheet pan. It's a very simple process. If you've not used a pastry bag like I have for 30 some odd years, be nice to yourself. Using a pastry bag is it's a complex skill that requires a lot of nuance to it. And please, 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 do not use a Ziploc bag. All right? A sandwich bag is designed to keep things in. A pastry bag is designed to let things flow out. And they don't work interchangeably. I know people have asked me that all the time. Well, I'll just cut the corner off a sandwich bag. Don't. That angers the pastry gods, and that's not pretty when they get mad. Don't do that. You can create a template. Some silicone baking mats will actually have the circles already on it, so you use that as your template. If you're using a silicone baking mat, which those things are wonderful, you can put your template under the silicone baking mat and still bake it. Don't try to do the tablecloth thing and pull it out because it won't work. But the silicone baking mat will protect it and it won't burn up in the oven. So you'll have it again and again and again. I've actually taken a grease pen on the back of a silicone baking mat and did my circles on the back of a grease pan. Whatever works for you. I've done this so many times. I've made millions of these, so I have the size down. So I just know. But and when I do the demo, you'll hear me say, squeeze, release, pick up, move over. Squeeze, release, pick up, move over. Squeeze, release, pick up, move over. That will make sense in a minute when I show you. Once we have all the batter out onto the sheet pan, we're going to bang them on the counter, the sheet pan on the counter really quickly. We want to get any air pockets that were in the batter out, and that's the only way to do it. And then we're going to let them sit and dry for a second and get a matte shell on them. And the reason for that is, let me see if I do it on I talk about it there. One of the distinctive characteristics of the macaron is the foot. Again, I'm not going to try and say it because it's a French word, but apparently it means foot. It looks like pie to me, and I love pie.
Pied.
Thank you. That's the word. But it still looks like pie. But that's how we get the foot. You have to let the shell get matte on top so that when it goes in the oven and bakes, let me go to that slide now that we're talking about it. What happens when you put something with moisture in a hot environment? It expands. Well, since the shell is matte, it can't go out, so it goes up. And as it goes up, the filling in the middle expands out. And that's what creates the foot. There's no special pans needed, nothing funky or anything. All you have to do is let them sit for about 15 minutes and get a matte coating on them and then bake them. They do like a fairly high heat because of the expansion, so somewhere 375 to 425. And notice the thing right after that is verify your oven temperature with a thermometer. Invest in an oven thermometer. Hello, my name is Keegan. I'm a control freak. Just because the dial says it's 425 doesn't mean that it is 425 or that it's 425 everywhere in your oven. There's a lot of chemistry happening in your oven, and the more you can control that, the better it's going to be. You need to know how old your oven is. Is it gas, electric, conventional, convection? Is it in your counter? Is it a double deck oven? Is it a standalone? How well insulated is it? How clean is it? There's a lot of variables that you can control simply with an oven thermometer and knowing your oven's personality, because they have one. I don't have any scientific data for this, but I swear the planetary alignment is another factor. Like if the moons can pull the tide, why not? I'm just saying. You'll let them bake for about 8 minutes, then you'll turn the tray around for another 4 minutes, pull them from the oven, and then let them sit and completely cool. Your first instinct is going to want to be to go, oh my gosh, this looks great, I want to eat it. Don't do it. You'll pull the shell apart and you'll have a top in your hand and the bottom still on the pan. Let them cool completely. Once they're completely cool, then you get to fill them. Now, some cookbooks will have you using an offset spatula to fill. Use a pastry bag. A, you get more practice with one, and B, it's much easier. You have much more control. See where I keep bringing that word around? Yeah. And again, you've got your filling pre-made. You can make your filling while your shells are getting matte and in the oven, whether it's ganache, although if it's ganache, make it ahead, because if it's still too warm, it'll be too flowy, and it'll be a chocolate mess, which will be fun cleaning up. But buttercream, and you just snip the tip off and pipe a little bit in the center. And when you're making your filling, think about what your shell flavor is. So if your shell flavor is, let's say, lemon, citrus, use a complementary flavor for your filling, not necessarily chocolate. Although that would be sad, because chocolate. But you could, so nutmeg, cinnamon, ginger, pumpkin pie spice. I'm sorry? Probably not poppy because they're too big, unless you could grind the poppy into a fine powder, right? Oh, for the filling? Absolutely. The filling can be whatever you want. Just match the flavors. So we do a cardamom shell with a salted caramel filling. Talk about yum. Any flavor you could think of, you know something that goes with it. Pair them together. And it doesn't have to be just one filling. You could do, like we do a s'mores macaron. So we use graham cracker crumbs in the shell. And we do a milk chocolate ganache ring. And in the center of the ring, we do some marshmallow fluff. So it's a s'mores macaron. Right? So you can get creative with it and see, like, anything you can think of, you could probably turn into a macaron. Raspberry, if you chocolate and raspberry, right? Orange marmalade and chocolate. Oh, absolutely. You could do a peanut butter buttercream with a chocolate shell.
Could you use dehydrated peanut butter?
Dehydrated peanut butter, that's a great question. No.
Okay. Too much
You'd
water?
have to, it's too dry. You'd have to adjust the wet, which is the egg whites. Without knowing the formula, you'd have to play with that. The same with cocoa, actually. So cocoa and dehydrated peanut butter are too dry. They'll absorb too much moisture, and they won't work. You'd have to add more egg whites. So you could play with it and see, but it's a different formula. The process is essentially the same, but it's a different ratio to make sure that they're successful. Eat. It's the best part, right? Eating. Macarons last about 2 days. In the freezer, they last up to 6 months. So once you've got them made, if the filling can be frozen, so like a buttercream or a ganache, yes, they can be frozen. Fill your sandwich cookies, fill them together, put them in the freezer. Then when you're ready, pull them out, let them sit for a couple of hours at room temperature, and enjoy. If the filling can't be frozen, they should be eaten relatively soon, in literally 2 days. The refrigerator has moisture in it, and moisture will be absorbed by the cookie because there's so much sugar, and that will change the texture. So a lot of times when you go to a store and they'll have a big display thing of them, they're frozen. Or they've added a preservative of some sort so that it doesn't absorb the moisture and change the texture. Yeah, so if it's anything other than 3 ingredients, don't buy it. Because you can do this at home. You're pros now. Yeah. All right. Before I start my demonstration, do not make them on a humid day if you do not have a climate-controlled environment. So if you have AC, that's a climate-controlled environment. There is so much sugar in these. Sugar is hygroscopic, which means it absorbs moisture from the air around it, and they will not turn out because they'll be too moist. You won't get the right macaronage, the right flowage from the shells, and they won't turn out. So humid, no air conditioning, don't make them. And the second one is really, I think, more critical than anything else. Be nice to yourself. If you're not used to making these can be really persnickety. You got to be nice. Take your time. It's just a cookie. I mean, don't get me wrong. We're trying to take over the universe one cookie at a time at the Lakehouse Bakery, but it's just a cookie. You deserve to be kind to yourself just like everybody else, especially if you're not used to using a pastry bag. It's not a simple thing. And when I do this, I'm going to make it look really easy because I've been doing it for 35 years. So be patient. I mentioned this, the technique is progressive. And then the last thing is so true. Practice. Practice, 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 practice. How do you get to Carnegie Hall? Practice, practice, practice. The first few times might not look really good, but they're going to taste really good. And your friends won't care. Like, oh, this is great, thanks. As long as you're not trying to charge them $6 for a macaron, they're not going to care. Right? So just share and practice. Yes, ma'am.
I don't think I've ever used a pastry bag. Are these a one-time only and then you throw it away? And you
That's a
can
great
buy
question. So
package of them?
our pastry bags one-time use only. Some of them are, yes. So, and there's a variety of pastry bags, and they come in a variety of sizes. They come as short as 12-inch, all the way up to 24-inch. They come in silicone, they come in waxed canvas, they come in plastic disposable. They come in thin plastic disposable, thicker plastic disposable. Get one that fits in your hand, and if you choose to reuse them, is easily cleanable. The silicone is super great for that because it is very easy to clean. The thing I find with the silicone, though, is once you've cut the tip, that's it. Whereas if you have a plastic disposable, you've got a variety of tip sizes to choose from depending on what you're doing. So I prefer the single-use plastic one. I'm also very cognizant of the environment, and we've connected with our local high school, and we recycle all of our stretchy plastics. So it goes right into the recycle bin. So because I hate single-use plastics. And restaurants are terrible for that, but that's why we've done that. Did that answer your question on pastry bags?
Yeah.
All right, any other questions before I get started on the demo? Yeah.
You had a couple of recommended, is the temperature range for baking?
Yes.
Was the low end of that if you're using a convection oven?
That's a great question. The question is, the 375 to 420 degree range for the oven, is the low end with convection or not? If you have the opportunity to turn, or the setting on your oven to turn convection off, do so. The fan, convection is a fan that blows the heat around to cook things faster. That fan is really powerful, and it will actually shift the shell as it's rising. And you'll have little leaning tower of Pisa macarons. But if you don't have the capacity to turn the fan off, try and go as low in your oven as you can. And that is the lower end of the oven range, because it is a little bit hotter in there with the air being circulated around. So very great question. Thank you so much. Yes, ma'am.
I missed the part upon where you get the rugged edge around the edge, the foot of it.
Right.
How did
So
you-
getting the foot, the question is on getting the foot. You let the shells get a matte coating on them after you've piped them. And when they go in the oven, because they're matte, the shell will lift up, and the filling in the side, the batter in the middle will come out.
Okay.
And that creates the foot. The thing I didn't mention, and thank you for this, reminding me of this, is how do you know when they're done? Like 8 minutes and 4 minutes works in my oven, but it might not work in your oven. You need to do the tooth test. And I don't mean like bite one. Remember when we were kids and we checked our teeth and we did we wiggled our teeth to see if it was ready to come out for the tooth fairy? You're going to do the same thing on the macaron. You're going to very carefully, my lawyer makes sure I say this every time, very carefully stick your hand in the oven, and on the top of one of the macarons, gently try and wiggle. And if it wiggles, it's still raw. If it doesn't wiggle, it's done. Typically, you check doneness with a thermometer, but these are so small and so delicate, you wouldn't be able to do that. So you do the tooth test. Just a little wiggle. And just check a couple on the sheet pan and see if it wiggles. And if it wiggles, go a minute more. Yes, ma'am?
Do you want it to not wiggle on the 8 minutes or the 4 minutes?
The 4 minutes.
The 4 minutes.
So that you don't want the question is on the wiggle. You don't want the wiggle after the 4 minutes, because it will wiggle after the 8. But after the second 4 minute section, it should not wiggle. Anything else before I start the demo? All right, we're going to leave it right there. So what I've got is I've got my egg whites that I've aged. Like I said, we did these. We pulled these out we pulled the yolks out on Wednesday. We kept them in the refrigerator in a covered container. Last night, yesterday afternoon, we measured out the right amount. And again, we used a scale. This is by weight, 8 ounces. And we've got and I'm just going to go in my KitchenAid bowl. It's clean, no soapy residue, no oily residue, just a clean mixing bowl. And in the egg whites go. I'm going to put it on my mixer. And this is going to get kind of loud, and I apologize. I've got my whip. Again, same thing, clean, sanitized, no oily soap residue on it. Raise up my mixing bowl, and I'm just going to start it on low. I just want the egg whites to start moving around, kind of breaking up a bit, kind of bringing in a little bit of air, but not a whole lot. And once I start to see some air pockets forming on the side of the bowl, I'm going to add in my sugar. Now, while this is doing this, if I've got my dry, this is the almond flour and powdered sugar. You can see it's a fairly fine powder. I don't have anything else in here, so if I had cinnamon, nutmeg, cayenne and cinnamon, that'd be really good. Powdered ginger, pumpkin pie spice, I'm trying to think, allspice. So the question is of the portion. So I've got 8 ounces of egg whites. I've got 8 ounces of almond flour. I've got 14 ounces of powdered sugar. And I have 7 ounces of granulated sugar. This will make about 35 full cookies, so sandwich cookies. It depends on how big or how small I pipe them. So the smaller I pipe them, the more I'll get. The larger I pipe them, the fewer I'll get. I've piped them as large as 3 inches before to use them as an ice cream sandwich. Oh, absolutely. That totally worked. The smaller size is really nice if you've got a lot of people to feed and you just have a little treat. And again, whatever size you want. They could be, dime all the way up to 3 inch. So it just depends on how many you get, depends on how big you pipe them. So I'm checking down in here, and I know you can't see because there's not a camera down there, but there's air pockets forming, and now I'm gently going to rain the sugar in. I'm trying to do this. Can you all see, if I move it this way, can you all see that a little bit better? I'm going to gently, like a spring drizzle, add the sugar. I don't want to dump the sugar in, because if I dump the sugar in, it would have to mix longer and there would be some dry pockets of sugar. So I want to let the sugar flow into the egg whites, and the egg whites move them around so that when all the sugar is added, they'll be evenly dispersed. It's going to get kind of loud in a second because I'm going to turn this all the way up. And if I were using cream of tartar, I would have put it in before I did this and evenly mixed it with a whisk. All right, all the sugar's in, all the way. Now, it might be hard for you to hear me because of the mixer, so I apologize for that. But we want to make sure that what's happening is that the sugar has been distributed throughout the egg whites and is creating armor around the air pockets that were created. And the armor is going to have little hooks on the shoulders that when they connect together create a scaffolding so that the egg whites, as they increase in volume, stay. That's what we need. This is the single most critical part of the entire process. Is getting the right amount of air pockets into the egg whites right now. If you go too far and over whip it, it will be too dry and they won't have the right fluid. If you undermix it and have too much moisture, they won't firm up and stay where you bake them, and you'll have a macaron pancake. They won't ever get that matte shell to them, and they won't ever get the foot. And there's a window, I swear, it's about that big between undermix and overmix. Fortunately, it's better to undermix a little bit because you're going to do some mixing later on. If you've overmixed it, it's too late, they're dead. You can't do anything with it. Don't give it to the dog. Fortunately, it's just eggs, right? It's just egg whites. Now, I'm keeping an eye in here, so like when you're doing this at home, don't go answer the door, don't check Facebook, don't read your book, right? Kind of stay focused on this. Because, again, you've got a really short window to get the meringue at the right consistency. And I'll show you what that is, and I'll show you how to check for that. It doesn't take very long, 5 minutes-ish. You don't have to have a stand mixer. You could use the old-fashioned beaters, right? The hand mixer with the beaters. Anything that will whip air will be fine. If you've got an old-fashioned hand crank, it might take you a little bit longer, but you can do it. I actually have a pastry chef friend of mine that can do it by hand. He's also got guns like the year, but I can't do that. That's why I got my KitchenAid. Now, what you'll notice is egg whites really aren't white when they're raw. They're kind of a yellowish color. But when you add air, they become white. The reason for that is light is diffused at that wavelength that turns it white. Just like when the egg whites are cooked, the proteins then coagulate and become white. Coolest thing, and I love bakery science. I totally geek out about it. It was my favorite class to teach at Washtenaw in the Culinary Arts program. I'm a total geek about it. I love it. All right, I'm going to turn it off. It's not quite ready, but I want to show you that. To check the proper consistency for the meringue, you want to pull it off of the mixer. And from just a straight stamp, just straight up, and then flip over. And these are almost ready. What you're looking for is a very stiff base, and the tip to just be crunked over. Now, if I look at this in the bowl, it's going to start to slide. And you'll notice that it's starting to break away from the edge. It's not ready yet, but it's really, really close because we've got a semi-firm base with the tip just flopped over, but we want to go a little bit longer. What you'll notice in making this is the progression is it will look soupy, and you'll see the tracks of the tine from the whip in it, and you'll be able to see them stay a little bit longer each time. And then it will be firmer in the middle and then still soupy on the side. You don't want it soupy anywhere. So I'm going to turn this back on for a second. Not for very long. Oh, helps if I put the mixer back on, the whip back on. I forgot that part. I got excited. All right, the whip is back on. And then back on high. Don't worry about, just go all the way. We're really going to watch this. And I kind of counted 12 to myself. Again, same thing. Now, if you have a mixer that the head tilts, don't use that as your indicator. You'll still want to pull it off of the mixer because the trajectory of the egg peak will be different based on this being lifted. So you want to just come straight up and flipped over. And can you see the difference? The other way is it won't slump in the bowl. That's the technical term, slump. Right? If it doesn't slump in the bowl, you've attained the correct flowage.
How many times have you not had the right flowage?
Never. 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 We had to do it in pastry school to check. So I got real good at making sure that I didn't have egg on my face. We had to. No, I mean I got the right consistency even then. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
So remind me again what happens if you overdo it, they just use a bit of top.
If we overmix the meringue, which is the question, if we overmix it, they'll be too dry. And you'll end up with more of a decoys, which I'm sure I'm not pronouncing that right either. But it's a different type of meringue disc that usually goes between layers of sponge cake as a dessert, as a cake. It'll be too dry, and it will stay exactly where you pipe it. It won't have the flowage that it needs to become the shape that we want it.
Does it become French?
Pardon?
Does it become like a French consistency?
If it's too dry, yes, it will become a crunch. That was the question. Will it crunch? And yes, if it's too dry, it will crunch. Yes.
If you're making straight meringue, do you want it to be firmer and drier if you were not making macaron but meringue? Would it be this consistency or a little bit firmer?
It would, if we're just making meringue, which is the question, it would be this consistency. To do like a meringue cookie? Yeah, so this would be the consistency. The reason for that is we want this to stay where we pipe it, and the only way it will stay where we pipe it is to attain this consistency. Anything more than this, it will be too dry, and it will become hollow once it's baked in the oven for a meringue cookie. But since we're adding things to this, we still need, you notice this hasn't gone anywhere. Like it hasn't moved. And that's what we want. Even in the bowl, it's not moved. It's still staying right smack dab in the middle. And again, from the first time I showed you, it didn't take very long. I counted to 12. Yes?
How would you know if you overmixed it at this stage?
How would you know if you overmixed it is the question. It will start to turn granular, and it will look dry. This still has a glossy look to it. I don't know if you can see it from back there, but this still is nice and shiny. And if you've mixed your meringue, it will start to be dull and not have that shine to it. I'm going to, because I want all of that meringue. So now I've got my meringue. And I've got my dry. Now, in thirds, I'm going to fold this into here. Now, typically when you're folding, you do a figure 8. We're not doing that. Because what we're going to do now is a controlled demolition of the air pockets we just created. But we need to do it in the right way so that we have enough of the air pockets left for the next stage. So in approximate thirds, I'm going to take my dry and add it on top of my meringue. And I've got a wide, thin, flexible spatula to get around the dimple in the bottom of the bowl. And I always point my finger. You don't have to do that, but I always do. And using the blade of the spatula, not the spine, the blade of the spatula, not a spoonula, right? A spoonula is the thing that has a little concave. That creates an air pocket, and you'll have to overmix it, and it'll be too much. I find it easier, and it might be, if I come around and do this, I'm going to start on one edge, and I'm just going to go around the outside of the bowl. And that's it. I'm flipping the spatula over as I go. Because again, this is a controlled demolition of the air pockets. And I'll kind of check to see if I have dry down in there still, and I do. So I'm going to keep going. I'm just going to keep flopping. I don't know if it's hard for me to, maybe what I'll do is I'll come up the aisle so you can see. I'm just going around the edge. I'm looking for dry. I don't see any dry. And when I don't see any dry, oh, I found some. When I don't see any more dry, I'll add another third. And see, I'm just going around the outside edge. Making sure that I get around that dimple so that all of the dry is getting evenly mixed in. You see any dry down in there?
I don't think so.
I don't either. Thanks for checking. All right, so no dry. I'm going to come back and grab another third. And I'm just going to add it right on top. Now, this is the only part of the process that doesn't have to be exact. It doesn't have to be exactly a third. It can be mostly a third. And then same thing. I'm going to keep going around and around. So what I'm doing is I'm letting the weight of the batter do the mixing for me. Because today's Sunday, it's my day off. And I'm just going to keep doing that. And you'll notice it's starting to firm up quite a bit.
Where in Chelsea is your bakery? Is it on Main Street?
We're on the corner of Waterloo and Sugarloaf Lake Road. So we're out of town. So if you go north on 52 through Chelsea to Waterloo Road, hang a left, I'm 4 miles down. We're, we're in the middle of the Waterloo State Recreation Area. We have a little patio right by the lake, so it's really nice to come out and sit.
How can you tell when you've done that enough?
That's a great question, and I'm almost there to answer it. What I'm looking for now is any dry. You see any dry down in there?
Yeah, it looks soft. I would think it should be harder.
It will be in a minute. All right, so this is the beginning of the third. Any flavors or colors that I wanted to add that are not dry would go in now. However, they cannot be liquid. If you add vanilla extract to this, you will kill every air pocket you just created. And it will go, and it's not usable, throw it away. You have to use a paste or a gel because there's less moisture in those and they won't collapse the air pockets. So vanilla bean paste, cake decorating stores, Sur la Table, they have color and flavor gels. Use those. You can find flavor concentrates on the interweb. There's a variety of brands out there. As long as it's not a liquid, it will work. So if you want a really fun color, purple, right? Don't use the little drop thingies at the grocery store. They won't work. Go to a cake decorating store, a specialty shop, and find the purple gel color. And you would add it now, at the beginning of the third. If you add it at any point after this, you'll have to over-mix the batter to get it evenly distributed. And then you'll kill the batter, and that defeats the whole point. So the last third We're going to pretend I put some color in there. The last third is in, and same thing, just going around and around the outside edge. And this is where it will start to get very firm. We've added the last bit of dry.
Would there be any reason that you would use that without any color at all? I mean, it would still have the flavor.
Whatever your preference is. You don't have to have a color. You don't have to have a flavor.
And then they'd be white.
They'd be tannish. Yeah. We're just going around the outside edge. But see how firm it is compared to a minute ago? It's still not quite ready yet, but there's no dry down in there. So I'll walk along so you can see. See how firm it is? And see when I kind of flop over how it just sits right on top? We're not there yet. See how it's just kind of sitting there? We don't have the right flowage. We need the right flowage. But you can see it's much firmer. To get the right flowage, we just got to keep doing this. We just got to keep flopping it over. See how it's just sitting right on top? Just sitting there. That's okay for right now, but we need to have the right flowage. If it doesn't have the right flowage, we won't end up with the right shape on the shell. So what we need to do now is, again, that part that the French call the macaronage. I call it the flowage. We need to keep mixing it carefully until it flows at the consistency of molten lava. See, that just kind of drops off and doesn't ribbon down. We want it to ribbon down so that when it hits the top of the batter, it will flow into itself so that you don't see that it flopped onto itself. There's a really bad dad joke that I go with every time to help you remember this. What did the Zen master say to the hot dog vendor? Make me one with everything. Come on, that was a good one. Zen master, hot dog, one with everything. That's what you want for your batter. You want it to become one with itself. You want it to flow in so that when you flop it over, it flows at the right consistency like molten lava. So that as it flows, see how it's ribboning down now? So that as it flows, you won't see it on top. See how it's still sitting on top?
Keep working.
We got to keep going. We're almost there. But we can still see where it was on top. It hasn't become one with itself. We're close. But it's not quite there. Not much. Just a little bit longer. This is the third most critical part in the entire process. Because if you overmix this, you'll get a pancake. If you undermix this, you'll get a Hershey's Kiss. Now, don't get me wrong, I like chocolate, but not quite enough to have a point on my macaron. That's not what we're going for. So I'm going to keep going. Now, if you were to undermix this, you'll have a little bit of flexibility because it's going to work a little bit in the pastry bag. So if you err on the side of undermixed rather than overmixed, because you've got a little bit of flexibility. And just a couple more flops. And I'm going to wait a second. I'm going to let the batter sit in the bowl and watch it to see what happens with it. And if it becomes one with itself, after singing happy birthday to myself or the Gettysburg Address or like whatever, then I'm going to run with it. And I'm going to watch it while I get my pastry bag ready and see what happens. So this is my pastry bag. This is a 24-inch pastry bag because it's 21 inches from here to here.
And that's a silicone one?
This is plastic. Yep, we get these from Dawn, the bakery purveyor out of Jackson, world's largest bakery purveyor right here in Jackson, Michigan. So we've got this, and we need a tip. Now we can't just cut this off. It won't be round. These are round cookies. So we need a pastry tip. It has to be a solid round tip. A star tip won't work. So one that has a little pieces in it, that's a star tip, it won't work. Something round. You want something, again, that will give you a fair amount of control. This tip number is 806. 804, 805, 806 will work. Anything higher than 807 will be too big, and you won't have the control that you need when you go to pipe. Anything smaller than 804 will require too much piping, and you'll overwork the batter. So 804, 5, and 6 are the best bets. Since you're starting out, start with an 804 to give yourself more control so you have more success as you're going through. Now, and if I look down in here, see it's nice and smooth. See it's nice and flat.
Oh, yes, yes.
It's become one with itself, and I can't really see where it flopped over.
Okay.
Oh. See what I mean by that? It's become one with itself, and that's exactly what I needed. It's nice and flat. Right? See the difference from before?
Is your tip like half an inch wide?
A little less. See how flat it is? That's what I'm looking for. It's ready to go. So, how do I get this very soft, flat batter into a pastry bag? I'll show you. First, you got to get your bag ready. You're going to take your tip, you're going to put it in your bag, and you're going to kind of push. And you're going to squeeze and hold that tight. Then you're going to take a pair of scissors. You ready? This is magic. Then you're going to take on here and twist while you're kind of giving some pressure so that pops off. Instead of trying to cut the bag and fit the tip in, this way the tip will never come out no matter how hard you squeeze it. Then you're going to take and you're going to twist just a little bit, lay it in the side, lay it sideways in another container. Let me move this out of the way for a second. You're going to fold this over the side. Just like that. Because I don't have 4 arms. Thank God. Like that would be, I couldn't imagine that. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my batter. I'm going to let it flow. See how it ribbons in? Nice and a nice even flow. Now, I'm used to using a pastry bag this large. My guess is you aren't. Only fill it as much as your hands can handle. It's a bag. You can refill it. It's amazing, right? Once you've got it, then you're going to take the bag, bring it up, and like you're showing someone where you live, you put it on the top of the container, and you're going to gather the bag, and you're going to twist. Now, we all have these wonderful opposable thumbs, thank goodness, and we're going to lock our thumb in place. Can you all see that? So my hand is still flat, and I've got my thumb locked next to my forefinger with the bag twisted in place, locking it in place so that when I do this, the batter doesn't all run back out the end of it and down my elbow. And that I have done a couple times. Twisting the same direction, I'm going to keep twisting. I'm going to pull my tail. I'm going to keep twisting. And when the batter reaches the tip, stop. Okay? Now, this feels kind of like a baby's butt. Give it a little squish. It does. I'll come around. It feels kind of soft and squishy, right? Soft and squishy. You got to protect babies' butts, right? So you'll notice the whole time I'm holding this, it's like shaped like a witch's hat, and I'm holding it straight up and down. So you want to protect the baby's butt in the palm of your hand, in here, right? So notice my thumb hasn't moved. My thumb is locked in place. And I've got the baby's butt protected in the palm of my hand. See, it is. It's like a baby's butt. Very soft and squishy, right? All right, and then you can see it's sitting in the palm of my hand. And again, notice I've not moved it. It's still staying straight up and down. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my right hand, which is mostly useless. I'm left-handed. I was born that way, thank goodness. I love being left-handed. But this hand is really just for show. I mean, a little bit. I'm going to take it and put it on the outside of the pastry bag. I'm going to turn it perpendicular, so I'm going to go completely upside down. So this is straight up and down. And I'm going to start in one corner, and I'm going to go, remember that phrase? Squeeze, release, pick up, move over. Squeeze, release, pick up, move over. Squeeze, release, pick up, move over. I'm going to start in one corner, and going in a serpentine, back and forth, I'm going to pipe this on the sheet pan. Now, the sheet pan is just lined with parchment. And however much I squeeze will determine how big or small the macaron is. And this is the single most well-developed muscle on my body for this reason. And again, I'm going to make this look really, really easy. And it is for me because I've been doing it for 35 years. Anyone doing it for 35 minutes, be nice to yourself. All right? So here we go. Straight up and down, about 1/4 inch, squeeze, release, pick up, move over. And notice I'm not worried about it falling out of the bag. It's going to a little bit, and if I got the flowage right, it will still stay in the bag. And also notice, please, that my right hand is simply steadying the bag, and I'm squeezing with these fingers, which is why this is the most well-developed muscle on my body. Squeeze, release, pick up, move over. And notice I'm picking straight up. The other thing you'll notice is that there's a point, there's a peak on it when I'm done. And again, if I got the flowage right, by the time I'm done with the sheet pan, they will flow into themselves and be flat. And the whole time I'm doing that, I'm making sure that the baby's butt is protected in the palm of my hand. Now, I'm done with the sheet pan. What do I do with the bag? I put it back into the container so that it's secured and not going to flow out anywhere. And then I'm going to bang this on the tabletop. I'm going to kind of use my thumbs to hold the pastry sheet, the parchment sheet, and go. And any air pockets that may have been there from the batter will have popped. And this, see how nice and shiny? Right? Fairly uniform. I think I did a pretty good job.
Yes, absolutely.
But they're nice and shiny. And if I gently touch with my finger, I get some schmutz. That's the technical term. Right? Nice and shiny. We don't want shiny. We don't like shiny in this case. We want it to be matte.
Oh my gosh.
Right? Nice and shiny. You can see the lights reflected in the batter. Very shiny, very pretty. some schmutz on my finger if I gently touch. We don't want that. We want this to get matte. We want it to dry out. We want that shine gone. That's what's going to give us the foot. So once, we'll set this aside. We'll have our oven preheated to 375 to 425, and we'll wait 15 to 20 minutes. No more than 25 minutes. Anything more than 25 minutes, and it will be too dry. And you'll have cracks on the top of your macaron. 15, 20 minutes in your oven, 8 minutes, spin, 4 minutes, wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. Done. Let cool, add filling, eat.
So do you leave them cool on that, or do you put them onto
We let them, the question is how we let them cool. They can stay on this, or if you're careful, you could take it off and let it cool on the table just like this. As long as they cool completely, it doesn't really matter how they cool. But that's it.
When you're piping, you put the bag and the tip right down to the pan?
That's a great question. When we're piping, how close to the sheet pan do we get? And you want to get about 1/4 of an inch. Because we want, the whole point in the flowage or the macaronage is so that it flows out the tip and the circle forms a circle as it flows, and that's what we want. That's how we get that. If we're too high off the sheet pan, it will form mashed potato like pyramid. And if we're too close, you'll get kind of a rose effect. It will kind of come up onto itself. So you want it about 1/4 of an inch. Yes, ma'am. Any questions? I thought I saw one back there. All right, any other questions? Yeah.
When you're storing your egg whites in the refrigerator, you have to take into account how fresh the eggs are.
Yes. So the question is, if when we're aging the egg whites, do we have to take into account the freshness of the egg? Yes. You still need to separate them and age them at least 3 days. Even an older egg still needs to be separated. The protein around the yolk are the strongest. And again, I've mentioned this. Hello, my name is Keegan. I'm a geek. You'll want, if anybody ever take an egg and like crack it onto a plate and look at it? When you do that, you'll notice a couple things. That the yolk is very tall and firm in the center. And then there's really tightly bound white right up next to it. And then there's some white that's a little looser out from that. And at the very edges, it's almost like water, right? So the freshness of the egg is going to determine how high the yolk sits and how firm the white around it is. And when you pull the yolk out, it's going to denature those proteins enough that they'll be more relaxed and groovy. The age of the egg will impact how long it sits. So if you've got an older egg, it will be as if you separated it 7 days versus 3 days. It will still work because the amount of time it's aged is not relevant. It just needs to be aged. And again, sometimes because we go through about 50 dozen eggs a week at the bakery, and we know we're making macarons, let's say for a wedding that we're catering, and we'll do several hundred for that. We'll do a bunch all at once and then put them in the freezer. And then from the freezer to the refrigerator to thaw, and then from the refrigerator to the countertop overnight at least to get to room temperature. So depending on how many you're making or why you're separating your egg whites, you could do it well in advance and leave them in the freezer. Did that answer your question? Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Does your bakery sell your stuff to any markets or grocery stores, or is it just at your bakery?
Nope. The question is where can you find Lakehouse Bakery products? We currently are in all 3 Argus locations, as well as Arbor Farms in Ann Arbor. You can also find our items at Agricole in Chelsea Mama's Mercantile Restaurant. We wholesale to Mama's Mercantile, Grateful Crow, Manchester Diner, Grateful Crow at Chelsea Catering, and Cattleman's Coffee and Provisions in Grass Lake. So a variety. Plus, yes, of course, the bakery. Any other questions on the macarons or the process, the ingredients, what we've done, how we did it?
What days are you open at the shop?
The bakery is open Tuesday through Saturday from 9 to 4. And this weekend is pizza weekend. So if you've not had our pizza, you really should have come ever. It's really good.
I was about to ask if they were pizza macarons.
You could use tomato powder in the shell. I saw that. Yeah. And then you could do like an Italian sausage, pepperoni, terrine filling, sure, or a mousse. And you could.
Crimes against the French. I love it.
Yeah, that would be. I would pass that one like I did the squid ink shrimp mousse. Yeah, that would be bad. I don't have business cards on me, but I'm terrible at those. TheLakehouseBakery.com is my website. You can see my list of hands-on classes there. We do have some gourmet sauces that we make and bottle in-house, or salted caramel or chocolate merlot. I of course think they're really tasty, but yeah, our website has all that information, our menu, our catering options, has all that. And like I said, I've got some macarons, so if there are no other questions, and I'll be here for a while, so if you have a question, because I don't know where are we on time, Vanessa? Are we like? Oh, we're at 5:30. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. You guys have been great. And let's eat some macarons.